thank you everyone for coming today. My name is Larbi Belkhit. I'm an industry analyst at ABI Research. I work in our 5G, 6G and Open RAN team, so I primarily focus on mobile network infrastructure and the innovations going on there from both a vendor perspective and operator perspective. And today we're going to close the day by discussing reliability and resilience in networks and their importance for the industry. Resilience is critical, and I think the main thing we want to start with is really understanding from an operator's perspective from both of our panelists here what it means to them and the different innovations going on in this space. So with me I have Ankush, Saikia from Free UK and Idir, Fodil from Orange. So if you'd like, I think Ankush, you've introduced yourself a number of times, but just maybe a quick rundown again in case anyone just joined.
All right. Yeah, I didn't attend the last session. My name is Ankush Saikia. I am from Free UK. I'm not going to repeat that. We are the fastest 5G in the UK.
Yes, and Idir, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yeah, good evening. Idir Fodil. I'm SVP Strategy and Performance Transformation within Orange International. We are in charge of building and managing all the international infrastructure for Orange network, submarine cables, voice, cloud, for Orange Business and wholesale, and also our affiliates.
Great, thank you. So I think I'd like to start this panel by discussing, or trying to get an understanding of what does network resilience mean for both of you?
I will try to explain it very quickly. Network resilience, from my side, means that if we have some issues on our networks, our customers are not impacted. So this is, for me, the first level of network resiliency. And today, specifically in the context we are living, and the fact that all the networks are interconnected, most of the traffic around the world is going through data centers, through submarine cables. The network resiliency is really very, very important. And if you remember what we have seen a few months ago in the Red Sea, where we have got a lot of submarine cables cut, also some fiber terrestrial. We got also, for example, in West Africa, it was, I think, 2 months before, all the fiber four submarine cable cuts. If the networks was not designed to be resilient, most of those countries would be disconnected from internet. So for me, the resiliency is the fact that the services is there independently of all what happened around.
Yeah, I think that telecommunication, has become a part of our life, right? Connectivity. So we have come to a stage where if we lose the connectivity, our daily life disrupts. And more importantly, it sometimes becomes a life and death situation if I cannot continue with my emergency call services, right? So to me, resiliency is continuation of the service, irrespective of whatever is happening around the world. And I think, we as the telecom operators always try to maintain that.
Understood. And I think something that I'd like to understand better is when it comes to the resilience, what's the biggest threat nowadays for operators? Is it the cybersecurity aspect? Is it natural disasters? Or what are you working on most to prevent from happening?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of various things, I mean, first thing that comes to everyone's mind is about natural disasters or, things like that. But it's also the small little things like, change in the network. Sometimes a change in the network goes wrong, and that brings the network, and that causes outage, and which causes disruption to the service, which impacts the customer experience. So yeah, we need to have the resiliency built, not just from the natural causes, but also into our internal processes, into our operational processes, so that at the end of the day, we just need to make sure that the service is available to our customer. We are providing not just the fastest service, but we are also providing a reliable service to our customers.
From my perspective, for resiliency, today we have, it's combination of a lot of aspects. The first one is security, the fact that we have more and more threats, cyber attacks, and so we have to secure our infrastructure, our operation, our services. The second one is the way we are operating our infrastructure. So today, if we would like to have resilient, reliable infrastructure, we need to focus more on the right, let's say, between brackets alarms, and instead of going and be overwhelmed by a huge number of alarms, it's also resiliency and reliability on our infrastructure, for example, and who is able today, for example, to manage the fact that if you have 3 or 4 fiber cuts, that your service is still running. So it's combination of all those elements.
Understood. And I think I'd like to also understand, I think many here too, like how do you prepare for and mitigate an outage? Because the uptime has to be to the point where a network is only down for up to 6 minutes a year, for example. But how do you achieve that in the real world rather than just in theory?
I will not make advertising. My boss keeps saying that we need to have the 5-9 availability, meaning that between any 2 points in our network, which is covering more than 240 countries, the maximum interruption in 1 year is 5 minutes. So this is what what we need to manage each day. How we are achieving this? First of all, by designing at the transmission level, because we do not need to forget this, all is running on transmission. So it's submarine, terrestrial. We use also satellite for some backup and some traffic. The second one is we use innovative solution at IP level. So there are new technologies like, I will go in detail, for example, like Flex Algo. In Flex Algo, we can prioritize some traffic, we can reroute dynamically. We use artificial intelligence in order to quickly react and reconfigure our network. So those are the main techniques we use.
Yeah, so I think these days there's a trend, so we are now gone past the stage secure by design, okay? We are now entering a phase called resilience by design. So we take into resiliency into consideration when we are architecting, designing our network or any application to start with, right? And that is the basic principle to ensure, that is the first step to ensure that we are building a resilient network or resilient application. Now that can be either by providing some kind of an alternate route, as Fodil has mentioned, but in some cases that may not be cost effective as well. So we need to see the implication of cost of maintaining a disaster recovery, or do we only go with the higher availability kind of an option? So yeah, so there are factors to be considered, but at the end of the day, the aim is to make a resilient network or resilient application.
Understood. And how do you work to balance the performance to resilience trade-off in your network? So how much can you reduce the capabilities of consumer applications to ensure that an ambulance has like a guaranteed connection at all times, for example?
I can take one example. I think in the panel before, the speaker was around 5G, 6G, and specifically on 5G, when we talk a lot about slicing. Today we have slicing in IP networks, so we're using some technologies. We can build up to 128 slices, and on each slice you can provide specific service level agreements. And what we do is that in some cases, if some troubles, you can use specific slice with the high requirements in terms of performance in order to guarantee some specific traffic. So all this is at technical level.
And do you think that other operators like yourselves must continue to pursue network slicing for this purpose as well?
I mean, even before the days of network slicing, we have a regulatory requirement to maintain our emergency services, right? Mm-hmm. So for some of the operators have even built their own network to cater to the emergency services. Mm-hmm. And some of the operators have dedicated some portion of their network for emergency services, right? Have you heard of, there was an incident when the autonomous car was rolled out first time last year in US, in San Francisco, that there was a traffic jam because the cars lost signal, and because the cars lost signal of the hired company, essentially all the cars stop in the middle of a bridge. Because that kind of situation we cannot have with our emergency services. And this kind of situations, I think network slicing can help. Okay, when we will be dedicated QoE for those emergency vehicles, so that they never, they have a guarantee of service.
Understood. So, like you said, because this shouldn't happen and you can't afford for it to happen, how important is your network supply chain when you're building your networks to ensure that your network is reliable and secure? And does the move towards creating open networks like Open RAN and so on, does that contradict the aims of having a resilient network, because you have so much interoperability testing that has to go through, and then because it's a new concept, there's limited validation testing for the multi-vendor approach, for example?
Multi-vendor approach, I'm not opposed to a multi-vendor approach. Multi-vendor approach is always good for the industry. Okay, it's all about building a robust interoperability testing mechanism in place. As long as have tested robustly within your pre-production lab environment, and you have the confidence before you roll out to the live environment. Okay. So I think I don't see ORAN kind of open environment is a threat to resiliency, as long as you are taking the necessary precautions.
Idir, any thoughts?
Yeah, I do agree. Just one specific point, I think in the way we were working, or let's say outside of openness, we have our contracts with our vendor, SLA supply chain in all countries around the world, etc. While moving to open, most of the time we rely on white boxes, and definitely we have to reproduce the same schema we have with our vendors on those white boxes. And this is currently, we started working on that, but definitely it's not threat to resiliency.
Understood. So
it causes some governance issues, okay? Because you have to manage so many suppliers now.
Yeah.
Instead of giving a single point of accountability, the accountability is split. Yeah. So you need to have a lot of governance in place. But as long as you're taking the steps in terms of resiliencies, I don't see it as a challenge.
Understood. And that's a really good point, because you have if you have a multi-vendor environment, how does the accountability, who's to blame, or how's the blame shared when an issue arises? Is that something that operators are concerned about, or have an understanding of how to go about?
This is what, honestly, beside the fact it's multi-vendor or not, this is what all operators manage each day. For example, when you have customer that is not, that has some failures when connecting to, I would not say to one hyperscaler, the first thing he will do is to call the operator and not the hyperscaler, even if the issue is outside the operator. So let's say the DNA of an operator is that we built since a while our capabilities to manage this multiple vendors, multiple players in one environment. So for me, this is what we excel in doing it. So for me, it's not really an issue of being in multi-vendor.
Okay. And how do you build a compelling business case to place greater emphasis on prioritizing network resilience in your networks?
It's quite easy. Because at the end of the day, we all work to improve the customer experience.
Exactly.
And if you do not build a resilience, it's going to impact your customer experience. It can bring down your NPS. An outage is always bad.
Exactly.
Not just for the customers, it's for the company as a brand. It's bad for the employees' moral perspective. So resiliency business case is not a tough job to do.
Exactly.
Because we are, at the end of the day, it is impacting the customer experience if you don't take into consideration of resiliency.
Understood. And how can you measure the return on investment for the amount of investment you're making into network resilience? Like, is it like implicit? Is it direct or indirect? Your like return on like how much you spend for this purpose?
This is, it is both, okay, but it is more intangible rather than tangible, right? So because we are talking about brand value, customer experience, and so which you cannot measure by, you can measure in terms of NPS and all,
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's a brand value if you do not, have the resilient or services to the customer.
And maybe adding one point is that you can measure it by seeing your revenues and why your customers still with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's what I was going to say as well. Like the
Yeah.
retention rate's probably the clearest proof in the pudding, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. And we've heard a lot this morning. We heard about network APIs and so on. But my question is, does that cause a concern by opening up this amount of data of the network? Yes, it's third parties that you're selecting, but the attack radius from a cyber attack perspective is opening up. So is there a concern about making sure that security is maintained within network APIs?
Network API is a new concept, right? But telecom companies are already exposing a number of APIs to third parties. For example, when somebody's ordering a phone on the website, we do the credit checks with the likes of Experian and so, right? That goes through an API. Okay, so from the telecom perspective and operator perspective, API is not something new. So we know what safeguards needs to be implemented, what guardrails we need to follow, and probably, because this is a network API, there will be some more regulatory guardrails that will be coming. But from an experience perspective, I think the operators already have the experience of implementing APIs, securing the APIs. So from that perspective, they should be able to carry on that experience and take any additional guardrails which regulators may throw.
Exact. And on top of that, we have a lot of example for telco, for example, for SMS, we already provide APIs. So it's not new, but definitely security by design must apply also to APIs. So in the sense that if you provide APIs acting on some network elements, so you need to ensure that those APIs act on some restricted set of events, and this is manageable. It's not really a big thing to do.
Understood. And I think you touched upon how AI is used for your network resilience, but what other ways can it be used for the purpose of network resilience? Could you give some more examples for that?
Yeah, for example, for network resiliency and the usage of data AI, this is your question. So one element we use today, which is really key, is how we reduce the number of events that are followed by our, let's say, supervision or L1 teams. Because one of the threats is that if you have teams that are analyzing hundreds or thousands of events and alarms, at one time they will not focus on the real alarm and be in kind of proactive analysis. So one element, we are using data AI on this. We are deploying it in international networks for B2B and wholesale customer. For example, I will cite it. We use Octera solution, which is developed by a startup in USA. We deployed this. So this currently allows us, for example, to reduce between 70 to 80% the number of alarms and be really proactive. The other is that we use data AI for our planning, in the sense that in some events we can quickly react on the traffic and reroute it on other paths.
Understood.
I think a lot of times what we have over the last few years, one term I have been hearing is that zero-touch automation, zero-touch provisioning, right? AI-driven automation, AI-driven. I think the zero-touch is still far off. Okay, I'm not very sure anybody has actually implemented zero-touch automation in the network. However, AI can help in a lot of predictive maintenance activities, as well as the preventive maintenance activities, by detecting the problems in advance before it impacts the customer. Okay, so those kind of algorithms is something we are trying to implement, and that's more on the preventive maintenance kind of use case.
Understood. And what are the concerns about utilizing AI? Because, for example, let's say you're using it for the network resilience purposes, as we're discussing, and then the model hallucinates. How can this be prevented, and what are the risks if it does so?
first of all, before we deploy the model into the network or a production network, it needs to be trained extensively in the lab and pre-production network. Okay, so because it's like any software, right? AI is nothing but a software.
Yeah.
So we have to follow the normal. We don't have to reinvent the wheel, right? We have a set process for any software development deployment. So we just need to follow the same process. It's just that this technology, the AI, takes longer time to train, longer time to become efficient. Okay, so we need to have that patience and keep on training it until we have the confidence before we deploy to the production environment.
Yeah, totally agree. And this is what we do. This is, as I said, in our DNA. We do not put things just like this in our networks. We test it, we validate it. And for example, we use data AI, for example, for detecting the malicious calls, voice calls, and how do we, so we have the algorithm, we have the model, and we have teams that also train the model. So we follow all the time, we detect a new malicious call with new IP or SIP headers, etc., and we inject it, we test it, and this is how we do all our days.
Understood. Because also from a network reliability perspective, let's say you're looking at the hardware. So I was in Finland last week, and Nokia showed us their AI services that they offer to their customers. And one of the services that they offer is like predictive hardware fault detection using AI. Is that something that's going to become more and more prevalent within like your strategies and going forward?
Yeah, it comes in the same bracket, that I talk about predictive maintenance, whether you're predicting a fault in the hardware or predicting a fault in the network, in a transport layer or in the core system or in the RAN network. So this all comes under the predictive maintenance kind of use cases.
Yeah, and this is also, I think this is the thing that's started to be done, what we call usage of digital twins. Yeah, this is one thing we started looking at it, how we can have view about our networks if we put some failures in the network, reproduce it, etc. So typically to talk about this part, we are putting more and more efforts on digital twin, and specifically on one topic is that the reliability is not just linked to external events. You may have some issues that are caused by the fact that when you provision new configuration on your network, new customer, etc., you may make some mistakes, and this can generate a cascade of events that at the end can make a huge problem on your infrastructure. So this is also one thing we work on.
And how big of an issue has the failures or faults with the hardware been, and how much easier has it become for operators to fix those issues preemptively using AI, for example? So if a site goes down, like it might have taken a long time before, but now you can, for example, after 2 weeks before hardware fails, you know that it's going to fail, and then how you address it is up to you.
I think hardware failure is a bit of an easy use case because you can bring a lot of build a resiliency on that layer, infrastructure layer. Okay, so that's why although we can predict the failure and take the preventive actions, but because we already built the resiliency into our infrastructure, so we have the capability to continue the service while the component is being replaced or repaired. Okay, so hardware is a bit of an easier job to manage compared to say the radio or something else.
Yeah, I totally agree. And by design, all our infrastructure are designed to manage the fact that one hardware is not running. So this is already taken in count.
Understood. And could you also talk, looking forward more? So, we had some discussions about 6G earlier. I'm not going to talk too much about 6G because we're focusing on this, but do you feel like as the standards and the studies are kicking off literally this year, do they need to place more of an emphasis on studies for network resilience and reliability for the next wave of networks, or do you feel like 5G has done a sufficient job in that regard?
No, I think the key here is data, okay? So it's all about gathering the insights before you can actually build those use cases. So as a network is growing, the matter that are generated by the network is also growing at an exponential growth, okay? So the challenge here is that to handle that kind of data at scale, provide some real-time insights, and then enable all the use cases to be generated at a near real time. Okay, so I think data is key here, whether we are talking about 5G or 6G or 5.5G. As long as the organization have built a robust data platform, the capability to handle such data at scale in real time and with good quality, then I think we should be able to tackle the future issues.
From my side, I was hearing so I will not talk about 5G or 6G, but just the fact that even it's 5G, 4G, 6G, or even all those will rely and need infrastructure. And by design, I think that what all we should keep in mind is that all should be put on top of infrastructure that is secured by design and resilient by design, so independently of any upper technology.
Understood. And how do your resilience and reliability requirements differ, whether you're looking at the core of the network or the far edge? Is it like you have the same approach no matter what part of the network you're looking at, or is there more rigorous approaches to ensuring that the core is resilient versus like the very edge of the network?
In terms of the SLAs, we don't see differentiate between the core or the edge. Okay, we look at the service level.
Okay.
So our aim is to maintain that service level to our customer. So that's our resiliency target or reliability target. Now to manage that, what changes we have to do, whether we have to do something on the RAN, core, transport, or whichever segment or infra. So that's the underlying problem. But at the top level, it's the service level that we are committed to our customers.
Yeah, same. The security resiliency apply to all segments, edge, core routers, any of them. Now, I think this is more security job. I think there is more focus on security on some specific, let's say, elements where we can have some issues or where we can get some attacks. And generally speaking, it may be, for example, Ankush was talking about the labs, the pre-productions. Sometimes we need to deep dive in the fact that pre-production is not open to internet, for example. So those are some specific area where we need to focus. But by default, we do not segment the level of resiliency or reliability.
Okay. And I think I just want to piggyback off some news that came out this morning with Virgin Media O2 and then Vodafone are going to be doing basically a RAN sharing and spectrum sharing model going forward. Doesn't that create a bigger blast radius if something goes wrong for the consumer or the customer, sorry? And then they might also have two different approaches or systems in place to ensuring that their networks are resilient. So when that happens, how do you merge those two processes together?
I think the news is that they're extending their existing collaboration. So so they have already been doing their RAN sharing. It has been already have been there for many years now.
Yeah.
I think the news is that they're extending that contract. Yeah.
So with the RAN sharing approach, because they are two different companies, how do you both maintain resilient networks?
I'm sure they have got all the necessary steps or taken all the necessary steps to maintain that SLA that is being committed to their customers.
Okay. And I think talking a bit about the blast radius is with all this use of AI and automation, like you said, you've got all these processes in place to ensure nothing goes wrong with all your use of AI software and automation. But is there a real concern going forward with AI being used at all different layers of the network, that if something goes wrong, it becomes a bigger issue rather than like a small issue that you have to resolve? If they interact with one another, for example.
Yeah, I would say, I'm just thinking and putting the elements. I would say that even using AI or generative AI on the networks, the process itself, on the fact that we was talking about API, this is why I was thinking, the fact that we will have things that cannot be modified just by click or so. Independently of any type, if it's AI, if it's API, we have strong set of functions, of applications, of features that cannot be triggered just like this. So for me, this is key. Otherwise, it would be a little bit difficult, in my view, to ensure the reliability and resiliency.
Okay.
I think AI in a telecom network is not new, okay? So it has been there for quite a while.
Yeah.
Probably the Gen AI has brought the AI concept into the masses, right? And that's why it has become very popular. But if I look at AI, even in our roaming scenarios, the AI is implemented to find the least cost routing and kind of things, right? In our transport scenarios also, AI is there already. If the one link goes down, then it takes the best route, right? So AI has been there in the network for a while. It's just that, for the last few years, couple of years probably, because of Gen AI, it is coming into more prominence. But, so I'm not really nervous about, utilizing AI into the network.
Well, that's good to hear, right? So I think the final question from my side is, for both of you, what innovations do you see coming down the pipeline from a network resilience perspective that excite you? Either of you.
Innovations on the network resilience. I think probably, the focus should be, because on the 5G, we have got a lot of focus on speed and latency, right? So from the standardized bodies perspective, 3GPP perspective I'm talking about, they have not put too much of emphasis on resilience and reliability, right? If you look at a 5G use case triangle, it's all about talking about IoTs, speed, latency and all. So I think the standardized bodies also need to do some work on this aspect and to bring some, kind of standards from the operator perspective. Regulators are already putting a lot of regulations around security. TSA is coming into effect from 2027. So I think, and with 5G SA, the network core is becoming more and more secure because everything is encrypted now. So I think, these are the stepping stones, or not the stepping stones, these are move towards the right direction right now.
Okay. Maybe I was thinking, there is one element a lot of people, firms and companies are working on, that is the fact that there is this IP optical convergence. I was talking before about the fact that using some artificial intelligence, we can reduce the alarms, planify, reroute our traffic, and I think what I would be excited of is to see how we can do this job for those two layers at the same time.
Okay, understood. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to open this panel up to the floor. If there are any questions, raise your hands. I think so too.
Yeah, we are safe.
So, all it remains for me to say is thanks to you, Larbi,
Thank you.
Idir and Ankush, Mr. Triple Duty, for Idir, you've done two, so you've done a lot of work today. Anyway, thank you very much to all of you, our speakers, our panelists, our moderators. You've been fab. Thank you very much indeed for your time and input.
Thank you very much.